Well, good evening, Australia. Good morning, United Kingdom. My name is Paul Hutton, and I am your host for today's ITS Squared discussion about the ITS World Congress that took place earlier this month in Hamburg. It was a phenomenally successful event, and it was really good to see people again in three dimensions in a normal setting. But there was a huge hole in the event, and that was the lack of our friends from Australia, where we really did notice the lack of Australians and a lot of other Asia Pacific members of the ITS community at the event. It was kind of like an ITS Europe event, but just on steroids this year, because it was mostly Europeans at the event. And so we figured it would be good to spend an hour just chatting about the event and talking to people who were there, their experiences, and then answering questions from those, whether you're in Australia or in the United Kingdom, who couldn't or weren't allowed to come to Hamburg this year. So our panel is to lead the questions for the event, Susan Harris, the Chief Executive of ITS Australia. So she'll kind of ask the questions of what was it like and what did you learn, etc., during the event. And to answer the questions, apart from myself, who wandered around the exhibition hall for 4 days, we will be hearing from Jennie Martin, who is the Secretary General of ITS UK, Rukshan Soysa, who was pretty much running the UK stand at Hamburg, who is the operations manager, and Chief Rapporteur Eric Sampson, who has been to every single ITS World Congress. You might well remember him from Melbourne and Singapore and pretty much every other World Congress that we've had. And so, Eric, we will start with you, if that's okay, because it was your job to sum up hundreds of sessions and therefore hundreds of hours of sessions into a few minutes in the closing ceremony. So rather than, when you have some good work, you don't necessarily want to just use it once and lose it. So we won't let it go to waste. You can use pretty much the same speech that you used back in Hamburg to sum up what you found were the key learnings from this year's Congress.
Thanks, Paul. As I said at the time, I can't give a proper summary of what I reckon was about 400 hours of sessions, plus the demos, plus the visits and so on. So I'll not even try. What I can do is paint a picture of what turned out to be an exhilarating week, despite all our fears beforehand, about the key activities in the Congress under the 6 topics. And as usual, I can only do that because I've got a fantastic team of rapporteurs, as Paul says, with some conspicuous gaps. There was nobody from Asia Pacific region, unfortunately. The team of rapporteurs, my universal eyes and ears, they go everywhere, they look, they listen, they report back. And from that, I can do 2 things. I can deliver this short picture, summary of what happened. And then sometime end of November, early December, we will issue the usual post-Congress report, a much thicker document going into a lot more detail. So I won't name them now, their names are in the report, but they do have my profound thanks. They worked very hard. Topic 1, automation and connectivity. Again, in congresses, this was the largest. It tended to be more about use cases and a lot more emphasis on deployment and the take-up of services. Less theory, more about practice. Automation received a vast amount of attention, not just in the sessions, but in the exhibition. Mainly the higher levels, automated driving, levels 3 and 4, but there was quite a lot about levels 1 and 2 support systems, address with things such as dynamic distance assist, infrastructure supported, adaptive cruise control. Safety and security, very prominent. Safety assurance, risk estimation, cybersecurity, another frequent visitor. Pedestrian safety. Slight surprise for a lot of people there. We don't normally in congresses have a great deal about pedestrians. A lot of papers looked at the differences in legal approaches to CAV technology within different countries, looked at the future role of laws. We were very fortunate. We had Mr. Sato from ITS Japan, and this is very much his territory. He contributed in sessions. He contributed at the ITS Summit. Cooperative ITS has certainly moved forward a great deal since Singapore. And the discussions looked at how do you integrate it into day-to-day business? Who are the stakeholders? What lessons are we learning about deployment? And what are the impacts on smart transport systems? Digital twins, roadside and cloud architecture gain important building blocks. Cooperative generally is moving from testing to widespread use, and road authorities and operators realize the importance for safety and efficiency, and so they're rolling it out. By contrast, highly automated public transport seems to be stuck. There were some successful pilots of automated shuttle buses, mostly on dedicated infrastructure rather than the open road, and the pilots have not been adopted. It looks as if municipalities and transport companies are reluctant to operate regular services. Why? Why is it that establishing an operational system is so much harder than running a pilot? The road to commercial automated vehicles is not just technology, and I think it's going to gain a lot more attention in the coming years. Topic 2, mobility on demand, as in the States, mobility as a service in Europe. This has been discussed at World Congresses since 2014, and the publication of the seminal MSc thesis that first came up with the concept. Popular topics we saw were the impacts on behavior, equity and inclusivity, standards and standardization, business models, impacts on the environment. We did get some new ideas, a framework for mass scheme indicators, user-centered trusts, a novel data governance framework that's beginning to catch on in Europe, and an improved algorithm, excuse me, to solve the dial-a-ride problem of how do you integrate autonomous vehicles into conventional public transport. The sessions and the papers and a vigorous discussion at the ITS National Association's meeting showed that progress has been steady, but overall it's inhibited by a lot of non-technology challenges. The complexity of bringing together difficult stakeholders in many organizations that are themselves very different from each other, lack of trust, willingness to share data between the sectors and among the sectors. Managing public subsidies and revenues isn't easy when in the value chain you've got both public and commercial actors. And frankly, incumbent transport service suppliers trying to block the launch of new ventures. And public bodies taking too long to update or even get rid of regulations to respond to technology developments. Looking ahead, there are signs that public authorities and the industry partners accept the need to develop the organization overall, adapt the product development for greater collaboration on regulations, and develop a more agile leadership. Topic 3, goods journeys from ports to customers. This has often been our Cinderella, the smallest topic at congresses for a long time, partly because the subject matter is so broad, partly because it's a bit specialized, and partly as the supply side has a great many small organizations. But I reminded the room that with COVID affecting daily lives across the planet, this topic has taken center stage. If you think about it, transporting the masks people are wearing, carrying the supplies of vaccines, delivering the food to grocery stores or the local takeaway, freight and logistics and ITS cannot work without each other. We had the best ever that I can remember response to the call for proposals, and we got some lively sessions, including our first ever global forum. The discussions revealed that the sector is slowly and steadily becoming digitalized and connected, but it's still a bit of a fragile system overall. The component parts, loading from origin to ship management, port internal management, port hinterland, delivery fleet management, last mile delivery, they are not always well connected. Repairing this and speeding up the development of open platforms is going to be the focus for collaborative work. Intelligent infrastructure, a relatively recent concept, and it reflects big advances in all the ITS standard technologies. There was much interest in AI, machine learning, new types of sensors, and algorithms to generate the intelligence to support intelligent network operation. Connected vehicles and comms, big again, with connection not just to the road vehicles, but water traffic, rail, and unmanned aerial systems, drones. Vulnerable road users, topic of much interest, especially the potential for CITS use cases for pedestrians and cyclists. Back to pedestrians again. Slight surprise, relatively few papers and sessions on electric vehicle charging infrastructure, digital twins in this part of the Congress, cybersecurity, but a lot more papers overall on trials rather than technical innovations. There were innovations, for example, green light optimal speed advice for buses that takes into account waiting at bus stops, directional speakers to beam voice alerts to drivers, and simulation of routing strategies at an industrial park using unmanned aerial vehicles. It's obvious different countries are at very different stages using intelligent infrastructure. Some countries are trialing use cases which they think might benefit them possibly. Other countries are way past trials and are showcasing the impact on the wider world, such as improved user interaction. 3 of my rapporteurs reported the same thing. They see a chicken and egg. Operators not investing in smart systems as too few vehicles are ready to use them, and drivers aren't being made aware of the benefits they might get, so they're not buying them. Somebody has got to smack heads together. Topic 5, new services from new technologies. A shift here. It was the smallest topic, possibly reflecting the trend of using technology for improvement of what we've got rather than the introduction of something new. A lot of business presentations in this area. It was the most popular theme, also the papers and the sessions, developments in urban air mobility. In general, the emphasis was concepts, how do you do it, business models for mobility in the third dimension, and how do you integrate ground traffic management and air traffic management. We had some new approaches to traffic management and tolling, using AI and deep learning to manage signals adaptively. We had modeling, simulation, monitoring, and incident detection, all with innovative ideas and new products. Data use was seen as an enabler rather than a new technology or a new service. Lots of discussions on approaches to sharing and managing data and the need for a collaborative business environment for sharing sector data. The newest presentations we saw linked behavior and social impacts, and they were looking at how to incorporate future mobility needs and mass type thinking into town and city planning. Perhaps the planners need new approaches and new tools. Topic 6, citizen solutions, new thinking on how do you design policies. Most of the papers, the research and the technical papers, looked at hardware and software solutions to reduce congestion from vehicles on roads, but in general, not by trying to divert motorists to other modes. A lot of them address technology innovation to gather and analyze air quality data and emissions data to support decisions on policies regarding air quality generally. Road user charging has been a familiar topic for donkey's years, but these discussions in Hamburg featured real-time distance pricing, time-based charging, once something we all laughed at when it was proposed in Cambridge in the UK. This is being seriously studied in Hong Kong to address their circulation and parking problems. We heard about innovative methods of traffic distribution, such as real-time information dissemination, dynamic modeling, and incentives to nudge drivers into using a road or a time period that otherwise they would not consider. So-called dynamic incentivized trip making, an emerging thought, but the challenge there is, how do you convince drivers it's worth their while to change their trusted route and trusted time? The papers and the sessions looked at the components of a smart city, and that suggests to me that implementing a true smart city is not yet with us. The tools that were identified as potentially contributing to smarter cities were data-informed decisions to drive measurable outcomes, using dashboard-type tools to show where the problem areas are to help the targeting of solutions, and again, the need for the planners in cities to do more to understand what is actually happening outside on the ground. An ideal smart city would presumably rely on multimodal solutions, with travelers using technologies to suit particular trips. But it was interesting that most papers focused on managing cars, traffic, and congestion, not much emphasis on mode shift. So looking back, a marvelous week, thousands of delegates enjoying a face-to-face event, first face-to-face event in Germany for about 18 months. And that came after months of screen watching. And I think that's one of the reasons we had such a phenomenal attendance. The Hamburg, Analytico and MCI team undoubtedly delivered a major event despite COVID. One speaker, at least that I heard, put it rather well. He said, "I did experience future mobility now. I experienced it in the sessions, in the exhibition, and the demonstrations I went to." So I think despite COVID, we're further down the road than we were 2 years back in Singapore. The road to a mobility world that's accessible, equitable, affordable, zero fatalities, zero emissions, resilient, and is seamless across continents. We're obviously not there yet, and around the globe there are some difficult problems still to be solved. But some of them, let's face it, are all about our behavior. If we want a better ecosystem overall, we're going to have to cut back on our personal ecosystems. Small projects with some exciting new ideas are being developed and implemented pretty much everywhere. The bigger, the more ambitious projects with potentially much larger impact are only moving slowly. They are often constrained by excessive concerns on regulation, integration, competition, collaboration, and note, none of these is a technology barrier. So we saw the future in Hamburg that week. Unfortunately, as Ms. Obama, who did the inspirational address, reminded us, it's unevenly distributed across the globe. But what's undoubtedly true about Congress is it's been true since 1994. We learn from each other. Congresses, for me, prove the Chinese proverb, a single conversation is worth a month's study of books. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Eric. And as I said, it was a tough job to sum up an entire week's discussions in a few minutes, but I think you've done as good a job as anyone could. And I think we can all spot that there is a big change in lockdown to see Eric Sampson not wearing one of his signature bright ties. So let's bring in our other panelists now, and let's bring in Susan in Melbourne. Susan, you heard Eric's summing up. Obviously it was a wrench that you and the so many of the people that we see every year, from Dean and Brian, everybody from Australia, weren't in Hamburg. What's your reaction?
Yeah, look, thanks very much, Paul and Eric. Thanks for that great summation. I've heard bits and snippets from the Congress, and congratulations to Erdico on what I'm hearing was a fantastic event. So more and more disappointed that we weren't able to be there to be a part of that. But really fantastic to see that breadth of papers and the breadth of content that was covered, and to be able to hear that in a short summary here from Eric. I think some of the things that really draw my attention, the commentary around connected vehicles now moving through to deployment, albeit with still some challenges, some heads needing to be banged together to move that forward. Do you think we're getting some traction there in Europe, and you're starting to see that more widespread deployment? Because it's something that we're still struggling to get that full traction on here in Australia.
In my view, it is very uneven. Some countries see the problem, realize they've got to do something, it won't solve itself, and they are doing something. That's certainly the case in the UK, where government and government agencies are getting together and saying, okay, we need to do something. It's a big grumble in France and Belgium. I think in Germany, the Congress is going to have a very interesting catalytic effect. We actually got marvelous support from the local mayor, Senator Tjarks, who's he's not exactly the mayor, sort of deputy mayor, but transport and smart transport is his thing. And he commented that he'd gone away with a rather full notebook on things that had to be changed. So I think Germany is alert to the need.
Yeah, we're always looking for insights as to how we can get things up and running a bit more quickly in that space. Look, the other, I think, interesting thing, which you touched on a bit as well, was looking at, it was interesting to hear that there wasn't really the focus on modal shift. I think that's becoming quite a strong argument here in Australia, particularly as we move out of lockdown back into, there's that love of the car and that sort of sense of being safe. But they're seen as an opportunity to really lock in some shift in this space. And Europe are very much seen as being leading the way, particularly in mass and new mobility solutions. Just wondering about the focus too on sort of mobility on demand and those sorts of areas, whether there was a lot on mass or mobility on demand, those themes coming through.
I didn't go to the mass summit, but what the rapporteurs have told me is that the biggest arguments there were getting people to change attitudes. And that's back to the incumbents trying to keep out the new arrivals. You've got a certain market of a certain size that everybody understands. And I'm an incumbent and I've got 43% and I'm very happy. What I can't get my head around, because nobody is convincing me, is 35% of a market double the size is better. And the big issue there is, well, okay, how do I get from now to then? What's the transition path? The thing that came as a bit of a surprise to a lot of people, including me, was Switzerland thinks they've solved this. And that will be the thing. I didn't get much time to go and learn what they're doing, but Switzerland, bearing in mind they've got a very centralized control system, Switzerland thinks they've got a way to make the transition to a different type of transport world.
I'll butt in here actually and point to actions kind of speak loud in Hamburg, because they have plenty of real world solutions that they're showing off there. In fact, the director of transport for Hamburg, his title includes "and mobility transition." So his whole job is changing the way people travel around. And next to the UK pavilion stand was a VW stand, which had Moya on it. And Moya is their own shared mobility solution. They're very stylish looking 6-seater pods, electric vehicles with a driver. And it's part of Hamburg's plan that you shouldn't have to walk more than 5 minutes to be able to get some sort of transport to get you to where you want to go within 5 minutes. And Moya had been pointed out to me, so I chatted to the CEO about it, and then actually tried it out at the weekend, and it was great because it wasn't like you would see with an Uber that would pull up right outside your door and then drop you off outside the door you want to go. It was kind of like a virtual bus stop. So you would call it up on the app and say, I want to go here. And it would say, right, walk to this particular location, which was an off main road stop. Wait there. We will be there within 4 minutes. So you would then go and wait. The vehicle will pull up, and then it would take you to within 100 or 200 yards of where you wanted to be. And we took it a couple of times. In both journeys, it was shared. There were other people that were either on the journey and we joined it, or they came on and they got on and then got off halfway through. And you could also tell that they were desperately mapping all the roads at the same time because of the amount of kit on there, with a promise that Moya will be offering completely driverless vehicles. So the real case or races, whichever acronym you want to use, of connected, autonomous, shared and electric mobility. They're promising that by 2024, 2025 at the very latest. So that was a real interesting thing that we saw within the exhibition, but also out and about on the streets of Hamburg as well. I'll bring Jennie Martin in because Jennie was a kind of she did the event as a lot of what we call punters would do the event, in as much as she did the exhibition. She sat on the ITS UK or the ITS pavilion, the UK pavilion stand, and she went to a number of the sessions. So kind of did all three, whereas Eric was mostly in the sessions. I was mostly in the exhibition, and Rukshan, who we'll hear from in a moment, was mostly on the stand. Jennie, how did you find the event, and what were your key takeaways that you'd like to share?
First of all, I think, Paul, I'd like to congratulate our German colleagues who aren't here, but we'll have to point them to the recording, and Ertico, who are here. It was a really great event. And I think some of us on the call have a reasonably good understanding of the sheer panic which must have preceded this, when the COVID situation kept changing, travel situation kept changing, German legislation kept changing, as it has done in every country on a probably monthly basis. It was actually, compared to, I mean, I haven't been to as many congresses as Eric, but I've been to a great number, and it's one of the best I've been to, not allowing any handicap for COVID. That's how good it was. So sincere congratulations to everybody. I echo quite a bit of what Eric has said, but I'm not going to repeat it. You've heard it all already. So I think what I would add, a couple of things. So comparing this to Copenhagen, which I think was 2018, the most recent European Congress, a lot of things had really changed, and changed for the better, very much so. The slight obsession with discriminating between commercial papers, non-commercial papers, scientific papers, that seems to have really eased off, and I'm guessing it's a combination of reviewers not being quite so obsessed with these technicalities, and presumably also the Ertico selection people also taking a more inclusive view. And I felt that worked really well. I moderated a session on micromobility and cycling, where we had people who were, yes, it was projects and demonstrations and whatever, as you would normally expect in a technical session. But we also had a chap who talked us through his commercial proposition of a platform for local authorities to manage the different micromobility operators there might be in their city, in times gone by, he'd have been in some horrible theatre out in the hall, but actually he was a really good fit in my technical session. So I felt that was really good, and I hope that'll keep going. I think it reflects how the sector really works. The sector does not actually work with academics over there and commercial people over there and people who work on projects in the middle. The sector actually is much more integrated. That's how we get the good results we do. So I thought that was really good. There was definitely much more talk about deployment than perhaps you've had in the past. Fewer demonstrators and research projects and more deployment. I think it reflects what we're also seeing with the automated vehicles piece. An acceptance that there's not going to be a revolution. I think it's a human thing. At the start of these things, we're like, oh, we're going to change the world and we're going to do it by next week. It's going to be great. And then you beaver away and you find that, no, actually, what you're part of is a 10-year gradual progression from A to B. So with automated transport, and so with all other forms of ITS. And I felt that had really bedded in, that we understand now that there's no good shouting about deployment. What is good is gradually implementing things, looking for the funding, doing the institutional work that's been alluded to already. And hey, you'll get there in the end, and it won't be a revolution, but you will have improved things for the traveling public. And the last thing I'd like to say, as somebody towards the end of my career and somebody of the female persuasion, I have never seen such a diverse crowd at a Congress. I don't think we were 50-50 male-female, but we were at least 30-70, if not 60-40. I've never seen that before. And it's even since Copenhagen, it's a real step change. And there were masses of younger people mooching about in the halls, not just on the day when we had the school children, but generally we had masses of younger people, which I think, again, and this has been a gradual thing, a lot of us have worked in recent years on diversity in the ITS workforce. And again, we haven't made a revolution, but we have made a gradual change, which is now coming through, and it's very much for the good of our sector. We're basically future-proofing it by giving these younger people more space to attend these events and to take part. So that's it from me. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks very much,
Jennie. Yeah, that's really exciting. Bringing all those young people in really creates another level of energy and challenges the status quo of those that are long-standing in the industry as well, so they can really add vibrancy into the event as well, which is fantastic. Paul, did you want to? I'll come back to you.
I'll just on that. Oh dear. And slight aside on the young people issue. Whenever I build the rapporteur team, I try to get some younger, newer people. This is the first year where I haven't had companies coming back saying, thank you very much for the invitation. We would like to propose X. And I have to say rather carefully, no, you've missed the point. This is an invitation for this person, not the company. The companies this year were, all of them said, fine, yes. Give her, and it was her, give her the opportunity.
Well, talking of younger people, let's bring in our panelist who lives in the under 40 side of the of life, and Rukshan Soysa, because Rukshan, you spent most of your time on the stand, and once people had got over saying how nice it was to see each other in 3 dimensions, which tended to be the first 5 or 10 minutes of your conversation with anybody in Hamburg, what were your main takeaways from the discussions you had from people coming to the UK pavilion, and what specifically were they asking?
Okay, yeah, thanks, Paul. So I think, as everyone has alluded to already, this Congress was a very positive experience, certainly given the official figures as well. We had just over 13,000 people from over 65 countries over the 5 days, almost 200 exhibitors, 210 sessions. And I think despite the restrictions, I believe the technical visits still took place across the city. So I think in terms of the numbers itself, it was almost like a normal Congress. Now, in terms of our stand, The idea was we wanted to really showcase some of the UK-based SMEs on a global stage. And of course, ITS within the UK landscape and some of the work that we do. There were 11 SMEs with us working alongside DFT, Innovate UK, TTF and Transport for West Midlands. And we helped them make connections and meet companies from around the world and gave them the opportunities they otherwise would not have had if they didn't attend the Congress. I think overall, the feedback that we received from them as well, in particular, was very positive. They made some new collaborations and connections, potential business opportunities, and it's something that they would definitely consider doing again. I think also worth noting, we welcome Trudy Harrison, who was recently appointed Parliamentary Under Secretary of State. This is a fairly senior position within the transport sector. She met us and all of the SMEs and took a genuine interest, I think, in what we were doing. And also Sarah Sharples, who was recently appointed the new DFT Chief Scientific Advisor. And we had a large drinks reception on the stand. And I think this was, again, another really good platform where we had attendees come up to our stand, ask questions about why we were there, what our purpose was, what our vision was in terms of promoting ITS within the UK and across the world. So I think looking back, certainly from an exhibitor point of view, I think the Congress reminded us as to why it's important that we have some presence at the flagship event, because the ITS World Congress is the flagship event within the ITS calendar. And also, you know, showing us the importance of showcasing the talent and innovation that exists within the UK. Certainly the location of our stand within the exhibition helped us to really stand out. And I think also possibly the fact that it's a UK stand helps to break down any language barriers, because it encourages more conversations and dialogue. So I think, yeah, overall, as has been said already, very positive experience. And I think, you know, we all certainly enjoyed it, our time there.
Thank you, Rukshan. That's an excellent summary. Right, let's go to some of the questions that have come in. Brian Negus has asked, well, we've rebadged in Australia mobility as a service as mobility or future mobility to broaden the definition. And this has been motivated in part by COVID, resulting in reduced use of public transport and shared transport. Transport on demand is emerging as a key. Did this issue feature in Hamburg? The question, Brian, came up. Now, Eric, I know you touched on that, but do you want to pick up any more on that question?
Yeah, it did. And some of the more experienced people in this area are saying we're having the same discussion with slightly different words. It's the difference between mobility, the ease with which you can go about doing whatever it is you want to do, and transport, which is the physical system that makes it possible. So I think that's taking us into something that did come up, the behavioural issue. Rukshan mentioned Sarah Sharples, the new, she's the new Phil Blythe, and sorry, Phil, she's a lot better looking. When she took her, she is a behavioural expert, that's her territory. And she was raving about the Congress. She's saying, you know, this the most fantastic introductory course for her job, exposing her to a lot of opinions about what is actually happening out on the ground. And what a lot of people are finding is that a city, say, says we're going to do this because people want it. And then they recoil because people don't behave in the way that they thought they would. And that's because there's been no attempt to get into the mobility issue. What are you actually doing for me? And I can see in the UK, I can see this coming because the government's saying, we're going green, we're going to decarbonize. And a lot of people are saying, well, I've just seen what it's going to cost and I don't agree. So this behavioural, the impact study is becoming more and more important. So I think by taking away some of the words in Australia and saying we're focusing on the mobility problems, what's underpinning them, I think you've made a good move.
Okay, Chris Boddy has asked, it's funny how different buzzwords come and go through different congresses, because we didn't hear that much. Certainly it wasn't slapped around everywhere. Smart cities this time as much as we have in previous congresses. Chris Boddy asks, a number of states and territories have smart cities initiatives. How will the ITS community increase its influence on policy development in improving transport mobility using the information from this congress? Anyone want to pick up with any thoughts on that? Go on, Eric.
I'm going back to Phil Blythe. Phil used to say that his job as chief scientific advisor to ministers was, first of all, saying to ministers, did you know that the technology world, if I can put it like that, can do this? And in most of the cases, the ministers said, no, we didn't. We were unaware of what was possible. But his job in the opposite direction is ministers say, I want this to happen. I haven't a clue how it might happen. And then his job was to translate that into technology. So I think the point about some of the buzzwords being the same is a lot of the politicians and the decision makers don't understand what they mean. And why should they? It's our job to make it clear to them. You tell us what it is you want to achieve, and we'll tell you options for doing it.
Okay, fair enough. Right, we're going to have a little poll now. We've not done one of these before on one of our ITS Squared events, but we're going to have a poll. Matt, City in Melbourne, is going to put the question up for you, and we're just interested in plans. Having heard about the physical event again, what are people's plans for coming along to Los Angeles next year? Have you not decided yet? Will you be there? Won't you be there? Is it you or your organization? Because sometimes, obviously, some organizations say they're going to be there and some aren't. I've just gone to try and click I'll be there, but I'm a host or a panelist, so I don't get a vote. So please, if you're an attendee, do vote on this now, and we'll get the answer in a moment and see who's planning to be in Los Angeles in a year's time. We were at the ITS America stand on the Thursday evening when they had a launch event for Los Angeles 2022, and I did point out that quite a few of us were at their launch event for Los Angeles 2021 in Singapore, and oddly enough they didn't find that as quite as amusing as I thought they might have done, but that's for potentially me opening my mouth too wide too often. But there you go. So we'll wait for the results to come in.
I just share from that point of view too, Paul. So ITS Australia have just made the decision today that we're going to put our hand on a space in the exhibition in Los Angeles. So we'll be there with a stand and looking forward to being part of things again. So we've missed one. We don't want to miss another.
We don't want you to miss them, frankly. So because as it's always an absolute highlight talking to Australians. And while the votes are coming in, I mean, I thought I would say that Coda Wireless, I know are very active in Australia, have been showing off a really clever new system where a very small patch goes on the helmet of a cyclist or onto maybe a rucksack, and is then automatically talking to connected vehicles, and so alerting vehicles to the existence of cyclists and pedestrians nearby. It can be a retrofit onto vehicles that don't have the kit, but I thought that was a really interesting idea for sort of people vehicle proximity that they were showing off. Gevi, who I know are busy in Australia, have a cycling solution that proved extremely popular at the event. And you'll be pleased to know that on the UNEX traffic stand that used to be Siemens, Aimson was showing off revolutionary real-time transport mode planning, and the example they were using was of the Victoria Road area of Sydney. So they were showing in real time how they were planning traffic in Sydney. Obviously, what they'd done is recorded it 12 hours, so they weren't showing, hey, there's no traffic because it's 3 o'clock in the morning. But you get my feeling that there were things that, as I walked around the exhibition, I spotted Australian influenced solutions. So while you weren't there in body, you certainly were there in spirit. So Matt, do we have an answer to the poll yet?
Oh, ta-da.
We're waiting for it to pop up. Haven't decided yet. Half of people will be there, 32%, and we won't be there, 18%. So, you know, obviously this is something that will change as the weeks and months go on. And I know Jakob Bangsgaard is from ITS2 is on this call this morning, and he would have certainly thought that if he could have had a 32% take up a year out from Hamburg, he would have bitten your hand off. So I think the Americans should be pleased about that. We'll come back to Jakob and to ITS America in a moment. I just want to pick up one of the other questions that Hossein Parsa has come up with. Any revolutionary entrance to the market to note? Now, the one I would have said I've already talked about, which is Moya, that was actually doing a new and what looks like successful way of doing shared mobility on demand. Jennie, I know, Eric, you didn't spend huge amounts of time in the exhibition because you were too busy with the sessions, but Jennie, Eric and Rukshan, any particular revolutionary things you saw while you were either walking around the exhibition or hearing in any of the sessions?
If I can start off, going back to what I said before, I don't use the word revolutionary in ITS context, but certainly I think I saw a trend of new commercial organizations or existing commercial organizations slightly pivoting in order to basically make money from trends in active travel and micromobility. I think that's very welcome. They will never get the front page presence of someone who moves people by drone or whatever, but I think they're building solid businesses for the future. I think policy is with them in most parts of the world, and I think they're going to, at the moment, it feels slightly strange to spend time with them, but I think they're going to become a normal part of the ITS sector.
I think what was new for me, and in a sense it wasn't new, urban air mobility. It's been talked about. They tried to demonstrate in Singapore and were beaten by the weather. They did demonstrate successfully in Hamburg. What was a tiny little thing, it's like, watching a child, 1 minute it's crawling around, next minute it's running. Urban air mobility has jumped up in size and importance. And we've got a European Congress in Toulouse next year. Toulouse is pretty much the heart of the European space world, space and aerospace. Urban air, if you want to know anything about urban air mobility, come to Toulouse.
Okay, yeah, well, the home of Concorde, among other things, which is a technology that's been and gone in our lifetimes.
And Paul, Eric, I was mostly on the UK stand, as you know, but in the stand next to us, I believe there was Moia, which is the ride sharing service for Hamburg, and I think a few other German cities. So I think I certainly did see an increase in mobility sharing sort of options. And I know this is a service that you actually took yourself.
Yeah, Paul. So yeah, and so as I say, that was kind of that was my sort of takeaway from the event. Any of our participants on our stand that you could say were doing anything particularly revolutionary? I suppose the driverless pods for moving luggage around an airport would be one
yes,
example.
That was Origo, which had a demo of a dolly, that they've actually already trialed in Singapore, and I think it went live in Singapore airport. And I think the prospect is they're hoping to demo it in Heathrow as well. So I think that's a work in progress. But also, yeah, I think all the UK-based SMEs had some quite revolutionary and innovative ideas that they shared, across the attendees that came to visit them.
There is Grid Smarter Cities was one that have been solving the problem of curbside management, because of course what you find is people just pulling up at the side of the road and blocking the traffic to make deliveries, especially difficult in the construction industry. And then what happens is that vehicles are then driving around trying to find somewhere to stop, and that's adding to congestion. So Grid Smarter Cities is working on a virtual curbside booking system where you book a stretch of the side of the road for a certain amount of time, and that's where you can then pull in and make your delivery or do whatever you need to do. And it not only helps manage congestion in a city and make things run a lot more smoothly, it can also become a revenue stream for a city as well. So that's a fascinating solution that they're coming up with in the northeast of England that of course could be used anywhere in the world. These hours always go phenomenally quickly, and I suddenly glanced at the clock and realized we're beginning to run out of time. So we'll go back to Susan for any further thoughts and questions while she has the panel, and then we'll wrap up. Susan, any other thoughts from what you've heard?
Well, I just wanted to give a quick plug. We do have some podcasts that were taken interviewing a number of our stakeholders and friends over at the World Congress during the Congress. So if you jump onto the news section of our website, you'll be able to dip in and see those. But yeah, really fantastic to hear about what's going on and the insights there. Interested to get that vibe from the exhibition as well. Sounds like that was really vibrant and there was lots of business being done in that space. Sounds like, Paul, you got on some technical tours, but I was interested to hear about the demos and technical tours, but I think we covered off that a little bit in the broader conversation as well. Yeah, so thanks very much for the run through.
Excellent, thank you very much indeed. One other question that's just come in, which we've just got time to talk about. Eric mentioned about the promotion of level 1 and level 2 technologies. Can you expand on that, Eric, as we still see regulators reluctant to accelerate mandating these technologies in Australia, says Lachlan. So do you have any further thoughts on the different levels 1 to 5?
I'm going to use an argument that some of you will be bored because you've heard it before. Pharmaceutical world is very good at managing risk. You've got a new drug, you try it on computer simulations, you attack it with various computer devised viruses, you then try it on live things, small mammals, big mammals, people, and then you get the results. And in 100,000 applications, 10 people are ill and 1 is very ill. But the pharmaceutical world can judge and say, well, the fact is 99,900, etc., benefited from this drug and 1 didn't. We will carry that risk. We understand it. The transport world isn't as good at managing risk. It's got various ways of computing things. Certainly in the UK, you won't get a zebra crossing unless you've had adequate fatalities. No, 1 fatality on a road, you won't get your zebra crossing. Doesn't pass the arithmetic test. But I think that's where the regulators have got to say, have we really got a grip on the benefits, and do we really understand the risks? And I think in most cases, the answer is no, they don't. Is that our fault for not explaining it? Or is it that the regulators are just thinking, I've got to be elected next year, so I'm going to vote as safe as I possibly can, so nobody can throw anything at me? So I think it's a case where there's a lot of education needed of the regulators.
Thank you very much, Eric. So change needed there, and a bit of change at the event this year. We got to meet Laura Chase, the new president and CEO of ITS America this year. Shailen Bhatt was at the event, but no longer in his role with ITS America. We had on the Monday of the event, while I was making my podcasts as well that were from the event, and so I'll plug those. You can find out more about those at highways-news.com. Just click on the podcast tab. I was chatting to Jakob Bangsgaard on the first day, and he let me know that he would be leaving at the end of his 5-year contract. He'd be leaving Ertico at the end of the year, which is a great shame, because I've got to know and like Jakob and respect him very much over the last 5 years, and he's done an amazing job. And the fact that his team, led by him, he will all say, oh, well, it was my team, but, you know, he was the leader of this. He made this event happen when a vast number of other leaders would have just taken the safe option of going for a hybrid, or sorry, for an online event, or just pushing it back another year or whatever. Jakob made it happen and had the strength and force of will to make it happen. He's going to be replaced in the new year by a gentleman called Joost van Tom, who's currently Smart Mobility Director at the European Automobile Manufacturers Association. So potentially we in ITS can get even closer to working with the people who stick the vehicles on the roads. And it's got closer through the years I've been coming to World Congresses, where you see a lot more from the manufacturers being interested in what happens to their vehicles once they've left the factory, and certainly once they've left the showroom. So we will see how that goes, but we will desperately miss Jakob and hope to be working closely with him in whatever role he takes on afterwards. And the final one is, it was Jennie Martin's final World Congress. She won't be in Los Angeles next year. And Jennie, final word to you, because you announced to the ITS Nationals meeting that that you are now in the kind of twilight of your time in ITS UK.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, it's just a quirk of ITS UK governance that because our financial year is the calendar year, I'm having to put in a lump in the salaries towards the end of next year to allow me to double up with whoever my replacement is going to be for a few weeks to get them briefed. And that means I have to explain to my board while I'm putting this extra money in. And so that's why I've had to give 15 months notice, which feels a bit stupid. But yeah, no point ITS UK paying for me to go to Los Angeles when I'm going to leave 2 months later. They should spend that money on someone else. So it was an absolutely great Congress. I really feel that Congress-wise, I'm going out with a bang, and I've very much enjoyed all my Congresses, whether I've been an exhibitor, a reviewer, a delegate, a speaker, a panelist, a moderator. I've done most things apart from actually clean, but maybe that's how I'll come back on the cleaning team. But yeah, it was a really good way to go out. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Jennie. And Jennie actually is being very modest about all this. She actually got a standing ovation at the ITS Nationals event from everybody, from all the leaders of ITS associations that were there, and it brought a tear to my eye. So how she just didn't burst into tears completely was completely beyond me, but there you go. Look, the time is up. It is gin and tonic time in Australia, and it's people will start phoning you up constantly time in the United Kingdom right now. So we're going to have to say thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you to Eric, thank you to Jennie, thank you to Rukshan, and thank you to Susan for setting up with her team this event. And we will speak on another ITS Squared event next month. Look out in your inbox and on the website for more details of that. But for now, wherever you are in the world, thank you ever so much for joining, and have either a good day or a good evening. All the very best. Thank you.